Mike, it's so great to have you on the podcast. I mean, we've known each other forever. I remember the early years when I was fishing with Harry Speer. Gosh, probably close to 40 years ago. There were not many guides down here, but you and Harry and Steve, tell me about those early years.
Those were great times that I look upon so fondly now. And it was strange. I was very much an outsider, not having been here and lived here and grown up here. And I came down here and people just didn't do that then. I mean, some of the stuff you hear about, 92 degrees in the shade and all that. I mean, it was cutthroat, like big time. And it was cool. I mean, I just kind of did it a different way and I was going to do it properly and not mess with anybody. And it ended up being just fine.
But how did you learn the dynamics in the country when you first got here? Because you didn't have anybody take you under their wing.
No. I came down. I'd been fishing here since I was a little kid, just coming down on vacations and stuff like that.
With whom?
Mostly just on my own. And the first time I ever did it, I was probably 5th or 6th grade. And we went with a guy named Jamie Brody out of Holiday Isle. And we ran up to Newport. And I hooked 5 bonefish on fly. I broke every one off, like instantly. And that was back in the days when we bonefish with like 8 pounds. It wasn't like this 16 stuff that everybody uses now. But that was it. I was just like, this is the greatest thing ever. There's nothing like it. It combined hunting and fishing at one time. And it was just, that was it. I was done.
Yeah, but how did you learn more to be confident in being a guide? Like, did you just look at a map and say, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this?
I spent every moment on the water. I had to work. I was tying flies, still commercially, a lot. And I'd do that at night, and I just fished. I had a boat right away, and I just fished and fished and fished. And I didn't know anything, and I didn't ask anybody anything. I think one of the great stories was like when I got down here, I asked around who's the best guide? I mean, I was this punk kid, right? Who's the best guide? Who's the best guide? Steve Huff. I mean, wherever you went, Steve Huff. So I drove over to Steve Huff's house on Duck Key and I sat there and waited for him to come home. And he came driving in and I walked over and I said, introduced myself and I said, I just want to know who your competition's going to be for the best guide down here. And
you said that?
Yes. And I don't know why he didn't just like dope slap me. He's like, get out of here, kid. You're bothering me. But he didn't. He was like, oh. And we've been friends ever since, but I never would ask him anything, like a spot or anything like that. So if he shared, but I would never ask. And so like all these spots that people knew about, like named, and I had no idea. None at all.
But you found them.
I found them on my own. And that was a lesson I got pretty early on once I met Harry. And Harry's like, you don't want anybody to tell you about a spot and what to do there, because we might not be doing it the best way. Go figure it out on your own.
Also, too, I think it goes without saying that if somebody tells you where they caught that fish the day before, you can't go there.
Oh,
no doubt.
Absolutely.
But there's so many people that will race you to that spot the next day.
That's one of the things that's changed immensely right now. Like Lower Keys backcountry was in the days before any GPS, cell phones. You had a marine radio, which you hoped got through. And I can remember George Hommel telling me, I was like, oh yeah, I was out in the water keys, fishing bonefish. And he was like, oh, you should just be careful out there. Right?
Yeah.
Now it's like, that's nothing. Every dingling is out there.
Right.
But it was then.
Because you had trouble.
There were only a handful of people that could come get you, like on low tide in the Lower Keys backcountry, if you got into trouble. It was a different world. And so there were few. And I think that was part of the camaraderie too. Like if I saw Steve or Harry out there or Nat Ragland, I mean, we'd pull up boats together, say hi, talk.
Right.
And now you're like, jerk, what are you doing here? You know, I mean, it's different. And so like that fishing pressure, like if Steve says, oh, I was down and I was tarpon fishing, you know, in back of Big Pine, I would not even go there for a couple days because that's been fished. Go further somewhere else. And that's what kept that tarpon fishing so good in the back that it doesn't have now, because somebody is beating on them
Every day.
So you can't have 2 fish come pulling into a spot and hang out there. Oh, this is good. 3 more come, 4 more come, 5 more come. And then you come in a week later and it's like, woo, boom, boom, boom. And then you leave them alone again. Right. Now they've been hit and they don't get time to build. And I think the same with permit too. That's changed a lot.
I remember Harry telling me when we were fishing 30, 40 days a year, I would ask him about a certain spot, you know, that we'd fished a couple of days before and we'd done really well there. And he said, no, we've got to let that rest for at least another 3 or 4 days.
But that's just impossible to do right now.
Yeah, for sure.
It is, but I still go through that motion.
In your mind.
Physically. If you fish with me, I feel bad for my clients. Because if we come into a spot and we do well, I mean, I'm almost certain not to go back there the next day. I found it.
And
They're
hoping
there.
nobody else is going to go in there.
Yeah, and I know I'm fooling myself. I know somebody's going to be there, but
That
still makes me feel good.
But that's how correct.
Right. So I want to bring it back. You were a trout guide in Montana before coming down here?
No. I mean, I did guide like through high school and stuff in Colorado. Roaring Fork, Frying Pan.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, really cool.
But no, I mean, I came straight here. My wife was at the bottom of the steps when I got my last test at Cornell and loaded everything in a Honda Civic and off to the Keys we went and we were here. God bless her.
Good for you. What'd you study at Cornell?
Fishery science.
Okay.
And I was working during the summers, and then one year I had to take off. I was working for the Colorado Division of Wildlife, and I realized I wasn't going to make it in a bureaucratic environment.
Right. How did that help you become a fisherman?
I don't think anything like you'd think of on the surface, but I think it's down there in the way you interpret things. That's background helped for sure.
Right. Let's talk about the growing years of permit fishing with Del and Steve and yourself, and who else was out there, you know, in those growing pains?
Oh, I mean, Harry, Harry, I can't say enough about Harry, and he doesn't get talked about much that anymore, but the guy's good.
Yeah, he is. He was my mentor.
He's good. Bill Levy, he was out there floundering around, you know, fishing them out of a canoe in front of Marathon. Nat did some. Gil Drake did some, for sure. But there's another thing people don't realize in the modern world too. Like, everybody thinks you go permit fishing with fly. We did not go permit fishing with fly. That was like not even something you thought about until that started coming along. And so when I first met Del, he had 14 permit.
Finished up with 500 and some?
513. He had 14.
Wow.
So, yeah, things changed dramatically.
You were there at the doorstep.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, you know, you'd see him and you'd throw a bonefish fly over there and whatever. That's not going to happen, but you did it. But you didn't go, we're going permit fishing today. Until, you know, Steve and Del kind of got things rolling along. And then I got with Del early on because of Steve. Steve put him with me to get more days. And we ended up, I don't know, I think we fished like 17 days a year or so.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. And I treasure those days because we were doing stuff, you know, so early on. And it was just like every time you got them, it's just like, wow. But when I kind of moved to where I wasn't here as much, we averaged like one a day was what we tried to average. And we did, and which seems really good now. God.
So how many shots were you getting on a real good day back then?
A real good day? 40, 45.
Oh, good Lord. What's a good day now like?
I had 40 last Friday.
Did you really?
Wow.
But that's like out there. If you do 15, 16, I would say that's a real good day.
It's a strong
now.
day, yeah.
And I'll tell you what was a bad day. One day Steve and I both launched out a Garrison bite. I was with Malcolm. He was with Dell. It rained all day. Terrible. Worst permit conditions you could get. And we both came in at the same time. And I said, oh, God, that was terrible. You know, and I always like, I would ask like Steve, like that kind of stuff. Like, how many shots do you get? Because I want to know.
Right. You can compare.
Right. Like, how am I doing? Right. And he's like, I think he said like 10. And I said, we had 8. He's like, well, that's all right, you know? And I think about that now. I mean, blowing, raining hard all day, and we had 8 shots. I mean, 8 shots now is like, that's not a bad day.
Not a bad day, right.
And that was terrible. I mean, that was like a terrible day.
I don't want to jump too far ahead too fast, but when did you realize that you guys were going to be successful at chasing permit? What turned the tide, if you will?
It was, it really was the fly first and foremost. And I don't know who came up with them, but whoever came up with the dumbbell eyes, that changed flats fishing. And nobody gets any credit for this. The dumbbell-led eyes changed flats fishing, changed bone fishing, changed permit fishing. And those guys figured out, our initial thing was these fish are so spooky. Oh, let's throw it 20 feet ahead of them. Womp womp, that's not working. And Steve and Dell really figured out, like, throw it to them, put it there.
Make him see it.
And then that fly, and I can tell you Dell did this every day. He'd take his little merkin fly and he'd drop it on the side of the boat and he'd look at it and he'd go, that looks good. And it was the way it sank. Because everything we'd done before, we had lots of flies that looked like crabs, but they all sank like womp, 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 or like this, and the fly needs to go just like a live crab. And that changed the whole world of it right there.
So it was about the dumbbell eye and how it was tied to keep it sinking.
It made it sink right. Versus like George Anderson had that fly where he had the coil of lead on the bottom, which got to the idea of getting the fly down, but it sunk like that. And that's not what a crab
it needs to dive.
It needs to dive.
And a lot of times the permit eat them on the dive.
They'll eat it on the dive, and flies have gotten a little bit better, and more fish are taking them up here. They almost all used to take them. They'd wait for it to hit the bottom.
So
before they'd get it. And you almost didn't, your highest percentage shot used to be a fly that didn't spook them and landed on their side, to where they didn't really get to look at it.
They didn't see it hit, but they heard it.
They heard it and they look back and they just see that shape, like, ooh, and they dunk. Because then if it lands 3 feet out here or 4 feet in front of them, like with our original Merkins, they're like,
they get too good of a shot.
So you would actually tell your angler to aim for the side of them?
No, I wouldn't. You didn't do that. But I'll tell you Dell's famous statement. He says, I aim for the head, and I'm going to miss a little bit one way or the other. And
that's cool.
Yeah, and it's right. You are going to miss a little bit one way or the other. And you'll spook a lot of them if it lands there. And I tell people to this day, like, we do things a little differently now, but I still say, spook them. I don't care.
Make them see it.
Spook 10 of them.
Make them feel it.
One of them's going to get it. You keep throwing over there 8 feet ahead of them. We're just wasting time. So
interesting.
Yeah. How has the tarpon fishing changed since you first were down here?
You really want to go there?
Exactly.
Well, we were talking about it on the couch.
Well, let's just do this.
I want to bring it up.
Well, let's just do this. This is June 5th, 2021. What's your season been like?
This has been an incredibly rough season. I can't imagine there's been a season that's been cooler weather throughout. And maybe I'm sure I'm wrong on that, but it's been cool. The fish try to come in, they get knocked out by the wind and the cold. Even when it seems like it's been pretty nice, you're still not out there sweating.
Right.
And a good tarpon day, by the time you walk out of your house and get to your car, you should have been bit by a mosquito and feel like you need another shower. That's a tarpon day.
Right.
And we're just not getting that.
So you think it's water temperature mostly?
And the wind.
They don't like wind. They're such...
They hate wind. And if they're not, there's one thing to have wind and they're all here. And they can kind of deal with it, and they bite pretty good. And they deal with it. But trying to get them to come in to the flats with the wind blowing is just, they don't like it.
You were talking over on the couch before we got started about the poon house, if you will, and what you like to see the fish do, where you like to find them. Can you articulate that again?
I don't fish hardly ever on the ocean. I used to have it as a matter of pride that I would not fish the ocean until June 1st, back in the day. Like, it's not going to happen. I'm not going out on the ocean until June 1st.
And why was that?
Because there were still plenty of fish everywhere else that you didn't need to. And now you do. They travel so much earlier on the ocean. I mean, mid-March, a lot of years we've gotten used to them going out there now. It's like, what are you guys doing? Get back where I want to fish you. But to me, tarpon fishing, I've seen too many tarpon in the old days, and it biases my fishing now. I saw them when they liked to bite and when they were happier. And I like to try to still find that and not have fish that are just, I don't know how to describe it, and I'm not taking it away from anything, but like if I'm throwing at a big group of 40 out there and 39 of them don't want my fly, but one ding-a-ling says, okay, I'll take it.
That's not tarpon fishing.
To me, I haven't really achieved very much.
Yeah, because
right?
you didn't fool that one fish you're looking at.
Yeah, and I wasn't like going, that's my fish.
It's like flock
Right.
shooting.
Yeah, right.
And you want to find them unbothered.
I want to find them unbothered. I want to interact with them. A calm weather. Interact with that fish and just watch him doing his thing and like, wow, let me show you what I got here. And put that bug on him and just watch those fins move a little bit, and like, here's a little tweak, And you're playing with that one fish. I love that.
It's a longer communication period.
Right. Exactly.
How do you feel about worm flies?
Talking about feeding a fish.
Okay, so I've thrown we're at what, June 5th? On my boat, there have been 12, maybe 13 guests with a worm fly this year.
That's amazing.
You're
I
a
just
dying
don't
breed.
care.
You're a dinosaur.
I don't like them. I think the fish are, for the most part, afraid of them, unless maybe you guys are throwing them, okay. But for the average Joe throwing it, I think the magic wore off. I mean, I think there was magic there initially. Right. But
it's
now,
very technical. If you don't do it correctly,
Yeah.
you're not going to get them.
And, I mean, I talked to Dustin or whatever, and he describes what he's doing with Thane, and it's like, my guys aren't going to do that.
No, it's very technical.
So technical.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, back to that. So my scenario, I mean, if I can find tarpon, whether it's in the backcountry, Lower Keys, whether it's in the backcountry, Florida Bay, whether it's in the Everglades, if I'm looking and hunting and hunting and hunting, and suddenly there's a giant dinosaur just laying there, all by himself or with two others or whatever, that's tarpon fishing. And you put a fly there and you feel like he's going to bite it. You do it right, he's going to get it.
Right.
And you fool him.
Yeah. I miss those days.
I like that.
Was the backcountry fishing this spring any good?
Yeah, I mean, off and on. I mean, I think the fishing's terrible right now. We fed 4 yesterday. Somehow we didn't hook any of them, but fed 4. But there's not many. You know,
But you're finding the ones.
But you're
that,
looking for 1, 2 shots, 3 shots.
that'll bite.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, it's more hunting.
Right. Exactly.
You were mentioning that wanted to say something when we first met.
Oh, so story about Andy.
Oh no, No, we just did that.
So Andy Mill, the big legendary tarpon fisherman.
Oh no.
So we came end of the day, Sugarloaf Marina, and Harry Speer is pulling out. I'm pulling out, and Harry comes walking over to me, and he says, "Mike," he says, "you're a big skier." He says, "You know Andy Mill?" He says, "Come meet him." And Harry Speer said, "He will be one of the best tarpon anglers ever." And this was 35 years ago.
Wow.
And
I love you, Harry.
I was like,
Right.
Harry,
Right.
Harry, come on. Why are you doing this, right? And I actually stopped at Harry's house that night. We both were on Duck Key. I said, "Harry, what was that all about?" And Harry says, "Unbelievable." Says, "Just show him something and he's got it." And he says, "I think he's going to work and get unbelievable." Bingo. Happened.
Yeah, well, look, I've been very fortunate to have fished with a lot of great guides, and he was basically my mentor for 7 years before I ever started tarpon fishing tournaments. He and I fished 30 to 50 days a year, and he mentored me bone fishing, permit fishing, tarpon fishing, and he was such a great articulate guide that could really explain what I needed to do. Because a lot of times in sports, it's hard to understand words because you may express something where it might be red, and I'm thinking of a certain red, but it might not be your red. But if you can show me the red that you're talking about, then I understand your red. Like when I was a skier, we always watched videotape. So somebody could say, "Look, you got to go into that corner, you got to tip a little bit early, and dive in or hold that line a little bit longer." So I'm thinking about timing in a gate. But if I see Franz Klammer come through that gate on videotape, then I have it. So with Harry and I, or any angler in a guide, it's hard to tell somebody what to do without showing it to them. So I was just very fortunate to be able to have already had a pretty good background in fly casting and fishing out west. So it was an easy fit. We were a perfect match for each other. And if I knew I was going to go fishing with Harry Speer the next day, I could not sleep. I was so wired, and it turned out that I didn't sleep for about 10 years.
Tell that story about how you got to the Lorelei at like 5 or something.
Oh, yeah. If I was up in Boca and I knew I was going to be coming down to the Keys the next day, and I'd walk out, like say maybe if I woke up, I couldn't help to go out and look at the top of the trees. And if by chance I had to get up and go to the bathroom, I'd always go outside and look at the trees.
Right.
If they were still, there was no way I was going to go back to sleep.
Right.
I'd go lay there and toss and turn for hours, and then at 6, you get up and drive down. So one morning, it's like 3. I get up, I see it's calm. I'm supposed to meet Harry, at the Lorelei. I know I'm not going to go back to sleep. And there was a tournament that was kicking off, and your brother was fishing in it. I get there, and I'm there at like 5:30. I'm not supposed to meet Harry till 7:30, and I'm walking the dock, just looking into the water, and your brother Kevin's there, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm waiting for Harry." He looks at the watch, says, "What time are you supposed to meet him?" I said, "At 7:30." He said, "A little early, aren't you?" But that's the relationship I had, with Tarpon and Harry, and he was an unbelievable mentor.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he gave me a lot of little tidbits. I mean, Harry was he was famous for
a lot of stuff.
I mean, you could not, if your whole life was ending, I mean, you needed a tarpon the next day, he's not going to tell you where to go. But I mean, it's little things like a fly cast. Put as much energy as needed into it. Not anymore.
Right.
Oh, that's a thing that drives me nuts when I see somebody that's been fishing with other guides, tarpon fishing in particular, and they're hammers. Oh God, they can throw it, but that fly is just
It turns over so hard.
yeah,
So,
and it's like, whoa, time out, pump the brakes here. Let's put that fly in there softly.
right.
That energy needs to be as much as to land it there. That's all. And Harry was the one that really like got that, you know, like he told me that one time, and like other weird things, you know, like we were fishing one time. He and I were fishing one time, and he's like, Mike, why are you moving that fly like that? It's like, well, we're tarpon fishing. I mean, you gotta move. You know, he's like, look at all this current. He says, just throw it out there and just let it drift right into his mouth. And it was a super high current spot. It was like, put it there, give it one little twitch 2 feet in front of him, and just let it flow to his mouth and watch him go, well,
Right.
you know, it's little things like that.
Right.
Just different than other people are thinking, you know. And he was great for like thinking. I mean, I think he overthought things a lot of times, but he was always like in tournaments when we were fishing against each other, he was always scary. One funny story on that, like in the all tackle one time, the water was doing really weird stuff way in the back, you know, and Fred Truxell was the guy who I fished in the all tackle, and we had just been out by Rabbit, and it was like dry land out there, and it shouldn't have been. So we were like running across the big basin through a bunch of wind and stuff, going up towards Cotton Key, and here comes Harry, and he's heading right out that way. And we see each other and stop for a second. And he's like, where are you guys going? Like, oh, we're heading, you know, over towards Snake Creek. I said, what are you doing? He says, oh, we're heading out by Rabbit. I said,
Good luck. Go get him, Harry.
Bring your towel and some sunscreen.
And that night when we got in, he's like, you could have told me.
And your answer was, you could
have told me
What have you told me?
That's right.
Well, I was going to ask, you fished many years with Kevin Guerin, Mike's brother. Why didn't you ever fish with Mike?
Well, maybe next year.
What the hell is that about?
You know, you kind of, and I haven't fished with Kevin in a long time. It's just by
Right.
chance we started fishing together a little bit, you know, and he was so damn good, you know, great sense of timing with tides and fishing the back like you. Do you do much rapport, correlation, or
With him?
intel?
We do. No, not really. I mean, we'll do maybe like.
How about in the early years? But now you're so refined, both of you. You probably don't need to.
Probably less in the early years.
But really,
Was it
You-
just
you
like
don't-
this
you didn't want to-
competitive?
I would not. I want.
you didn't want to.
That's
help.
how I was taught by Steve and Harry. Was like, you go out and learn it yourself. And it really wasn't until when I left the Keys full time and was only coming back part time, then I like said a lot of stuff to him and gave him a lot of stuff. But before that, I was like, no, go learn it,
Go look.
go looking, you know. And that's,
What was your relationship like with Kevin growing up?
oh gosh, it was. We're a long way apart. He's 7 years younger than I am. So
Right.
growing up, it was, you know, he's this little tag along, right? But my parents would never let me take the car unless you take your little brother. So on all these fishing and hunting things, he was coming along. And which is what I think he's so tough now, because he had to be. It's like, no, you do it. And I mean, one thing I still giggle about to this day is we go duck hunting, and we had this massive decoy bag that held 6 dozen decoys, and we'd make him carry it.
6 dozen decoys.
And it would drag on the ground behind his feet. It was like on a backpack straps, but it would drag on the ground behind his feet, and he'd be way back in the distance, and all you could see was the square of the decoy bag. You couldn't even see his body. He'd be back there. He's coming. And he would do it because that's what he had to do.
Right.
And that's, I think, to this day, like, he's tough.
He's really
he's
tough.
tough.
Right.
Like, he doesn't care. There'll be wind days, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's so bad. And he doesn't complain.
He
He's just
pushes,
like,
yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me about the Dolphin Superskiff. I mean, Huff had a lot of A lot of people followed Huff and his footsteps with his handkerchief around his face and the clothing and the Dolphin Superskiff, which I think he still runs. I think he's now getting a Chitham possibly. But the Dolphin Superskiff, a lot of the great guides fished that boat. Tell me about why that boat is so good and why everybody gravitated to it.
I came down, my first boat was a big Dolphin, the 18 Dolphin, same hull as a Sidewinder. I got that boat because everybody said, "Oh, you're fishing, you need this big boat," right? And immediately I realized that was a big mistake. And I saw what Steve had. Harry was fishing out of one. And I mean, these were the guys, right?
Right.
And so Nat Ragland had one, and Nat Ragland was really too big a guy,
right,
for a super skiff.
Yeah.
I mean, if Nat switched his weight, the angler's flying. I mean,
right.
So I bought Nat's, which was old blue. It was blue, which was a nightmare because everybody could tell who you were everywhere. But I bought that boat like the next year, and I still fish out of a super skiff. I love the super skiff. It just pulls so nice. It spins instantly. My clients today, I mean, they were like, "How are we going through this rough water in this tiny boat?" And it is a tiny boat, but it
floats like a cork.
It just goes through that stuff. And
your brother threw me out of his boat twice. We were in the backcountry. I hooked this tarpon. And as soon as I hooked this fish, I got him, but I got him. And for some reason, your brother pushes the back end of the boat. You know, he spins it, and I go flying out of the boat. I go, "What are you doing?" And back then, I had some pretty good balance.
Right,
you know,
right,
those things
right.
were so tippy. Kilpatrick said recently, "If I ever sold my boat, I think I'd cry." But it's the old school guys that have these boats.
Well, it's especially in the lower keys. You don't see them as much in Islamorada.
That's because
it's Steve's influence.
No, it's not that. It's that we have to cross lots of rough water all the time, and yet we still need a boat that can pull really well.
Right.
We don't need, especially with the bone fishing the way it is now, we don't need to get that shallow. And the super skiff, while it gets shallow, it will push over crazy shallow stuff, but it doesn't want to float there. But you can push it over it.
Interesting.
And so, like when Scott Deal came up with the first Maverick Mirage, like he kind of copied it, but not quite. And the Maverick Mirage was sort of the same, but like it was different. Like, boom, you'd be bone fishing and you would run aground, poling. You weren't going any further. In a super skiff, you run aground. I can lean way over to the right, the angler can, or whichever side. You can walk it right across what you need to go across, or you can just tilt it on its side like that and still keep going. And I mean, that's part of the reason I'm sure fishing a lot of huge bonefish shallow that my shoulders got torn up, because I mean, we would chase these giants, you know, hooked up and running, and just chase and chase and chase over. That boat's not floating. It's just moving mud going across there, but you could do it.
Right.
And then, like, the first time I fished in a whipperay, and I'll never forget, I was like, "Oh my God, if I could have had one of these just for fishing downtown Islamorada, it would have been amazing."
Right.
And it would have saved my shoulders.
So how bad are your shoulders now? And as a fishing guide, you know, that's a big liability.
They've come back just fine. I've done tons of rehab. I do stuff for them every single day. If I'm not fishing, I'm doing weights and stuff and different exercises for them. But at one time, it was bad. I fished 3 weeks of June one year with my arm in a sling. And that was in the days when you did not start your motor in loggerhead, by the way. You chased your tarpon poling. And I can remember Richard one time going, "Mike, faster, faster." I'm like, I'm one-handed.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, that was part of why. I mean, that was a small reason, but it was part of the reason I left being here all the time, because I needed to
Rest them.
just rest them. So it just couldn't keep going like that.
Were you ever in jeopardy of losing your guiding career because of the shoulders?
I thought so, but it turned out to be not be.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Bonefish years when those big fish were, in the Keys in Islamorada, and you were fishing all those tournaments. You spoke about tarpon and about permit. Tell me about those Bonefish years.
I would say the best stuff ever, and I know you've heard that from other people. It was the greatest. It was the greatest. And when we get together with, talk to Steve, or the other day with talking to Mark Coco or Bob Branham, and it's like, this is what we talk about. This is like what we just worship those times, and that brotherhood of being there and doing that together. Like it was amazing stuff. Those fish were they're just unbelievable.
Right. We
had one fish in a tournament, and this was all tackle on a spin fish and the spin line. You have to remember the spin line, monofilament, not braid, but monofilament. I mean, it gets nicked on anything, it breaks. And a monster fish, way in the back, and it took off. It got into deep water and was shooting down the edge of the bank. And I was chasing it at 2,300 RPMs in the boat for 300 yards. For 300 yards.
That's crazy.
And not gaining. And it was like I couldn't go any more because we jump on plane and that would be too much. And you're just like,
did you catch that fish?
We got it.
How big was it?
12, 14, I think.
Right.
And it was like, how can these fish do this? I mean, they blow me away.
Yeah.
They're incredible. They will go, a big fish like those giant ones, they're going to deep water. And they're going to get there.
Fast.
Yeah, and they're gonna go there no matter where it is. They will make it to deep water.
I remember the it's almost like a trimmed up motor when they'd leave the flats, like on Shell Key when they'd take off. Oh. That was a sight to be seen.
And I mean, it was like, I talked about working those single and double tarpon and stuff, but I mean, that was like the ultimate chess match. Right. Is playing with those giant ones.
Well, you fished the all tackle, so you were fishing with bait. What was it like to watch a big bonefish get the scent of a crab?
Okay, everybody should see this once in their lifetime because it's magic.
It is.
And the first tournament, the first time I fished the all tackle, I was just a punk kid, right? And I get Fred Troxel, who had won it before, with Harry. And we didn't pre-fish, nothing, right? I mean, we're just like, here's the tournament. I mean, here you go. And
did you have a pretty good idea where to fish?
Oh, I totally knew where to fish.
But
I hadn't fished bait.
Right.
Were you nervous?
No. I really don't get nervous like that. Like, I just dig it.
Right.
And so I hadn't fished bait, right? And here's just, so we start, there we are. We're waiting to get lines in. We're waiting. We're watching tail and bonefish. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, we can go. And pull in. And Fred throws his cast. It's like 35 feet from the fish. I'm like, what is going on? Fred, what are you doing? He goes, turns around, he looks at me, he goes, I think it'll be just fine. And it was. It was the coolest thing ever. They're just like bird dogs working scent.
Yes.
Those bonefish.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's that crab, and it's over there, or a shrimp. And he's doing his thing. And then you just watch that dorsal go, bunk.
Nikki, it was unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
It was absolutely crazy. It was like a bear that all of a sudden got your scent.
You did a lot of that, bait fishing for bonefish?
Not a lot of it, but I did. I was on the boat with Bokar and Harry Speer. We fished the Bay Bone together 3 times. We won every year with those guys because Bokar was one of the best in the game. And it always fished the current. You wouldn't fish the fish, you'd fish the current. And Bokar would always bite the end of the crab off and throw it like 50 feet above the fish.
So would they rush right over to the bait,
No.
or would they just cruise?
They're like, ding, and they'd hit scent.
Right.
But then they were like dogs, like coming in on birds. Dun, 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 dun.
And they narrow it in.
And then all of a sudden,
You do that so well.
and off to the races.
It's almost like a shark, when he has the scent, they go from one edge of the cone to the other. And then when it gets a little tighter, the scent, it gets a little bit richer.
Sure.
And then they just accelerate.
And you're watching all this with like dorsal and tail out of the water as he's doing it. I mean, and you're just like, this is incredible. But I'll tell you what's hard though, when you're not used to doing it. When you're throwing monofilament back in the day, where is it? Right?
Right. And you lose the crab.
Yeah. Like the crab, you think it landed there. And I'd mark it like, there's that spot on the bottom. And all of a sudden the bonefish is like, oh, he's way over here. And you're like, what is he doing? And that's where the crab is.
Right.
You don't realize they've drifted, because you assume it's a big crab. Like it's there, but it's not. And we came up with weird little scenario to work that out too.
Let's hear it.
No, I can't tell you.
Come on. You're not fishing tournaments anymore.
Come on, Harry.
Those big fish died. Come on. Give us a piece of the puzzle.
We'd actually take, and it was like trout fishing stuff. And back before strike indicator stuff even happened on trout, but in steelhead fishing, there's a thing called a corky, which is just a little cork. And I would take and I'd put that and then blood knot on like a 20-pound piece, like that far, not even that far, like that far, down to the shrimp or bait, and have that above there. And then you could put it out there and you could watch that thing and you knew right where it was. So then you could move it if you needed to.
Right. Adjust.
Yeah.
It's like nymph fishing.
Sort of. I mean, except it's totally visual.
Right.
You know, but now you knew where it was, which helped me immensely because, like I say, I'm fishing fly every single day. I'm looking at a fly line. And suddenly I step on this boat and I got to go fish this. And I'm like, where is
There's
this?
nothing in front of you.
Yeah, where's this thing? I don't know where it is. So we did, that wasn't doing it all the time, but like early in the morning and stuff when you couldn't see anything, it was good. And it had nothing to do with like that thing showing you how to bite. It was just showing you where your
bait was.
That brings up a question. Are you throwing all colored fly lines for tarpon?
Okay, here you go. Mike the Luddite. Yes, and I hate the clear lines.
But what about the ghost tip?
It's ghost all right for me. I don't know where.
Is it because you're always communicating to your angler where that fly is, whether to strip it or leave it, or
I'll throw some clear stuff like early morning on rollers. I keep trying it, but I really don't have anybody that is willing to devote to it. And I think you have to devote to it and just say, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do this. I mean, a lot of people
don't fish enough to understand and feel that, that distance. And most people get on your boat and they're rusty from the 5 days they had the previous year.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to acclimate to that.
When I tell them, geez, didn't you watch your fly? Why are you moving it like that? Watch the fly. What are you talking about? I mean, I see the fly.
They don't see anything.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
see
but it's interesting because Nathaniel Linville, one of the best anglers down here, he throws all colored lines even on the ocean. So, what are your thoughts on it? Does it really enhance your chances?
You know what? When monocores first came out back in the day, I don't think people were like, oh, you can false cast over the fish and stuff. They false cast over the fish, they'd spook like crazy with the clear line right over them. So I don't know.
Here's
I think in a big school where you don't know what's going on, like in the morning early,
where that lead fish is.
And you don't know where everybody's at. I think it can help you, sure. And you throw a big long leader. Okay, most people can't throw a big long leader.
Right. See, what I've really liked about the ghost tip is I can cut strings really well. So you've got maybe a 12 to a 15-foot leader. Now you got a 9-foot clear tip. So that gives you a good chunk of clear. Mm-hmm. So that string on the ocean, you can cut it. Where I don't think with an all-colored fly line, you can get that colored fly line that close without bothering fish.
Right. And you know how many people do not grasp that whole cutting it concept? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do not go back to the front. Forget them.
Oh, it's amazing. They always want to go to the front fish.
No, it's over.
Oh my!
These are still coming, but people, and I just harp on that so much. Look at the big picture. What's going on?
Right. Find fresh fish at the back.
But you
of the-
realize people, it's happening 100 times faster than it is for them versus what you're seeing or what I'm seeing.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Who's the best fisherman you've ever fished? And why?
Wow. I don't know. I mean, I'll say Del Brown in some ways because Del was fearless casting a fly. Not the greatest caster.
Yeah, I heard that.
Not the greatest caster. No way. But somehow the fly got there all the time. And it got there fast. Like Del would almost freak me out sometimes. It was like he had a spin rod. Like, did you even make a false cast? It's like, Del, there's a fish, 10 o'clock. You see him there, 60 feet? Plunk. What? Plunk? How'd it get there? And that was pretty cool. And he was fearless. Like, no matter what the wind was doing, he's going.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever dig any hooks out of his back?
No, but...
Out of your back?
And I wrote a little piece for Fly Fisherman magazine, kind of a eulogy to him when he passed away, because he had this old gray jacket like from Sears, like 1950s. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And it had all these dings and holes all over the back where he would just bounce them off his back going out there. And I'd always give him a hard time. I was like, Del, go buy a new jacket. This one's just fine. And I always liked the story. One day it was just so bad. It was so nasty. And Del was always wonderful because he would go through the motions like it's a terrible day. But he'd never just say, let's not go. So we'd eat at Stouts and we'd go drive down to Sugarloaf. And yeah, this looks really bad. And we did that one day and he's like, this is really good. What? What's good? Well, I can go get that new zipper put in my jacket. It's just like, you're Martinelli's apple juice. Get rid of it.
Do you still get excited going fishing?
Yeah, big time. I mean, like you said, you couldn't sleep. Like, I do that literally every day still.
Really?
Every day.
One of two things. I either get up at, got to take a leak at 5 a.m. and I'm looking out the window, which I try not to do, but I can't. I have to look. And I don't see anything moving. And it's, whatever, if it's tarpon season. And I'm like, now I can't sleep. I'm ready to go. Or I look out the window and like it's been lately and the palm trees are and then I'm going, oh crap. What are we gonna do now? But I still
go to breakfast at Galley Girl.
No, I still totally love it for sure. I love it every day of it, and a lot. I mean, as a guide, who you're fishing is huge.
Right. Your connection with them,
you
because the fishing might be poor.
Yeah, you want people that enjoy everything, and like. No, I mean, if I'm out there and it's like, oh, there's whatever, some big shark or whatever. I mean, I don't like get all gangbusters about it or anything, but I still like people to acknowledge it and go, oh, that's cool. That's a giant bull shark, I mean, little stuff like that. Versus, womp womp.
I want a picture of a fish.
I just want a picture of a fish, which I can't stand.
What's your oldest customer that you've had on your boat, and for how long have you been fishing him or her? Sadly,
most of those guys have passed away.
No kidding.
Yeah, and it's something that happens to. I mean, I fished for years. You asked why. We'd never fished together. I had 11 clients who were my entire year.
I was going to say you were probably book solid.
And
you still are.
Yeah. I mean, that was it. 11 clients.
For the whole year.
For the whole year. And that was back in the days when we fished all the time. I would book 285 days a year usually fish 275 or 265.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And that's what you did. And I'll tell you what's changed. Bonefish. We were bonefish guides. That's what our skiffs were called. That's what we were called. If somebody asked my wife 25 years ago, oh, what's your husband do? He's a bonefish guide. That's what we did. That's what you were called because that was your fish. Every day,
was your annual year-round fish.
Year-round fish. And when those bonefish went away, and now you have permit, and if you're a fly fisherman, and now you have permit, which how many people can do that? But people try.
Uncatchable. Kind of.
And then you have tarpon season. And then guides make this big thing like they're fishing all the time, but it's pretty hard to do it if you don't have that base fish that's around year round,
It's hard to find 285 days to fish.
Sure it is.
So what's the bone fishing like down here right now?
The bonefish are coming back. I really wanted to get together with BTT guy, Ross Bocek, before we did this. So I really want to discuss some of this stuff with him. I fear all the data that they're coming up with right now says that these fish are genetically intertwined with fish in Mexico and Cuba and all that. I'm very worried about that. I'm totally excited there's bonefish back.
Are you suspect of that?
I know, but I don't think we're going to get the big fish back.
Because
I think it's different genetics.
The genetics are crossed.
Right. You can't take a key deer, and everybody's like, oh, it's the same thing. You can't take a key deer and take him up to Michigan and he's suddenly a giant whitetail because he's got more to eat. I mean, no, that doesn't work that way.
Genetics.
Yeah. And if that's what's happened, if we've gotten these fish that have come from somewhere else, which a giant fish there is 6 pounds.
So you don't think these fish are coming from Islamorada?
I don't think so.
No, a lot of the a lot of people are thinking that maybe these newfound fish that we have here are coming possibly from Cuba, since they banned the nest there and the Gulf Stream carries the larva here. But we've always for the last number of years, everybody was talking about that DNA, that big bonefish DNA is gone.
And that's, if you think about the first year class of these new fish we have back are 2014. 6-year-old bonefish should be bigger than 5 pounds.
You're right.
And that's where they seem to be kind of stopping.
Stuck at
the biggest bonefish I've seen non-old style, which there's a handful of in Islamorada, there's a handful in Biscayne. But of the new bonefish, the biggest one I've seen in years and years and years we caught today. And not Mickey Mouse. Oh, it looks like it's 12 pounds. 7 pounds, period.
Today.
That's what it weighed. It looks giant. Compared to everything we're catching. It's 7 pounds. And that's the biggest one I've seen. It's great fish. But I just don't see those fish getting bigger. When they had up at Long Key in the research thing, they had some 12-pound fish there when Roy Crabtree was doing all that research, and those 12-pound fish were like 12 and 13 years old. And, they grow fast early, and then that really slows down as they get older. I think those 2014 year class fish should be bigger by now.
Right.
But back in the day, the lower keys had real big fish, 11, 12, 13 pounders?
There were some.
Some. We caught a 12-pounder on Boot Key once, and that's the furthest south I've ever caught a big fish.
We caught a 14 and a half in the contents one time. One of the world record fish is from down by a net key on the grasses. That was like a 14-pounder.
Okay, so there were big fish down here back then.
Oh, well, the fish averaged 7 and 8 pounds.
Really? Average?
Oh, that's average.
Yeah.
I mean, in the bonefish tournaments back in the day, 18 inches or smaller couldn't count.
Yeah.
And if you look at most of the bonefish we're catching, they're like 18, 19 inches. If you look at fork length, that's the reality of it. They're still great. Couldn't tell you how happy I am to have them back, but they're not big yet.
Right.
And those average size fish, I just don't know that we're ever going to see that again. And the other thing with these new ones is they don't seem to want to be shallow. I don't understand it, and they will tail a little bit once in a while, but it's not the same thing like you and I know. it's like, whoop, we kind of got shallow.
Right.
We better go back over here again. They're not just
Getting
up
in
there.
skinny stuff.
Yeah.
And you think that's all from pressure?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's different genetics.
Yeah, different fish. Because you don't have that much pressure down here.
No, these fish, in a lot of places I'm fishing them, they're not pressured at all.
Right.
There's groups of fish that I'm fishing that no one else is fishing. They're in weirdo places. They're crappy places.
How often do you find a new spot?
A lot.
So you're still looking for new spots.
Every day.
You know, Harry told me a long time ago, he said, I was asking him the same questions I'm asking you about learning areas. He said, every day when I'd have a customer, I'd go look at a new area, for at least an hour and a half every day without my client knowing I'm, going on an adventure. I'm going scouting. But you're still doing that.
Tell people all the time. What do the fish do here? Have no idea. Never. I've been there before.
Do you tell
but
them?
I don't,
do you tell them that
I'm
you're
happy to tell them? And if anybody complains about it, I say, you know what? There was somebody else that was on this boat where you just caught that permit. They were on the boat when I tried that spot before too, And like during COVID, I spent so much time pulling crappy spots. I can't even tell you, by myself.
How successful were you?
It's so much polling between success, but there's little things you get. Like there's some permit in some spots that nobody will ever think of. That I found just during COVID, and it's painful.
That's exactly what Justin Ray said. During COVID, he just went exploring.
It's painful. You're just like, oh my God, I need to go catch a fish. But 5 days and you haven't done anything.
But that says a lot about you, still willing to endure pain to go find something new.
Because that's the fun.
Yeah.
That's what's fun to me.
Finding those little nuggets of gold.
One fish in a new spot to me is just like ecstatic versus, we'll go here and there'll be 7 permit. Hope you catch one, I mean, that's good.
Right.
But once I know it, and that's why, like I say, sometimes I feel sorry for somebody like my guy's fishing with me because
it might be slow over there.
Great, and they'll be like, oh, I can't wait to get back there tomorrow.
We're not coming back here tomorrow.
We're not even launching in this area.
Yeah, didn't Steve Huff say that? Don't tell me where the fish are because you're stealing from me.
Right. He said, I don't want to know where you found that because you're stealing.
And see, I think that way we thought about things back in the day was how we were, which I think is sad that it's not anymore. I mean, I think it's really sad when I see things like last spring in June, bunch of tarpon showed up in a weird place, right? And there was one boat there.
Other than you.
I just went past it. I knew what they were doing, but I saw them there. And the next day there were like 7 boats there. They didn't get there by accident.
Right, 7.
They got there by telling everybody.
Right.
Why would you do this? Now you've all just goofed it for everybody,
And Instagram is a death in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell what fishing's like in the Keys. Just go on Instagram. And if
Everybody's-
it's good, everybody's
really-
putting stuff on there. If it's not, it's crickets.
What's your biggest aggravation as a guide now after all these years being down here?
I think the ethics have really changed. I think people are lazy about taking care of spots. I mean, when I see what goes on in some of the layup spots, like the first time I was in there for 10 minutes this year, the first time I was there this year, and I just screamed at the top of my lungs, why am I out here? Just what I saw going on. I mean, people don't realize what we did there. When you were fishing with Hoover in the tournaments, and Hoover used to call them nests, and they're out there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, there's a little nest of them out there, and they're all laid up, just floating on the top like corks.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to do that if they just keep getting run over every day.
And that's a traffic jam right there.
And it's
the highway.
Guides are doing it. You know, I saw a guide last time I was in there come all the way into the back of the main basin. He started out, he ran all the way into the back of the basin, stopped between me and somebody else, only 100 yards from both of us, and starts poling. And it's like, you get into the back of the basin by the ditch, you know, and that's how you do it.
That's how you enter it.
What are you doing? And I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping like some of the stuff we have that we're trying to get into the sanctuary plan now, where some of that will be no wake zones. That could be huge to let those tarpon get in places. Maybe that's why we don't see those fish being around like we're not seeing them this year. I mean, maybe if they could get into places and hang out and not just get run over where they feel like they got to keep moving all the time, you know? I think Simon Becker and I were talking about that with the permit. Like, there used to be all these places where they floated in huge schools all the time. And then those schools would branch out onto the flats around there. And now those schools aren't floating because they're just getting run over by boats.
Too many people.
Yeah.
What's the future hold?
I don't know. You know, I've chased different things and watched them all fall apart. Surprisingly, this place holds up. I mean, when Steve moved to Everglades City and Harry moved up north and I went out west and Marshall Cutchin left, we all did it at the same time. And we all thought it was over. Like, it's over. And it might go on for a couple more years but it keeps going. It surprises us, you know. It's like, wow, it's still happening. The baseline is so different. And I don't know if I would have stayed full time, if I could have handled watching it change. But being away enough of the year and only, you know, part of, you know, coming back and forth and stuff was actually good, because I was able to adjust with the baseline and like still, you know, like it's okay, you know, but it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
If you were to do it all over again, would you be a fishing guide?
Of course. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody else. That's
your DNA.
It's a crazy thing to do. Don't go into that, but
don't go into what?
Don't go being a fishing guide. But if you can't literally do anything else, if your whole life is just, this is it, then great, then do it. But you're not going to make money. It's hard. The divorce rate among fishing guides in the Florida Keys, I wouldn't even want to think about it.
Yeah. How hard is it on your family and the dynamics of distance and, where you used to live and where you live now,
right?
And the dynamics of a family life inside the world of a fishing guide?
It's incredibly difficult if you want to be really good. If you want to be okay, not a big deal.
Get off the water at 4, go home.
Not even that. But it's that pursuit of learning everything. And to learn everything, you have to be out there all the time. And it doesn't matter if you're off. I mean, like Steve Huff right now, he's supposed to be retired. He's fishing all the time. He can't help it.
Yeah.
And he's not just going to places he knows. He's going to places new to learn more. And if that's the way you're wired, then it's hard. I mean, bless Patty Huff's heart. I don't know how she's done it all these years.
Especially riding a bike across the country.
Steve comes walking in, we're over there to go have dinner. And she's like, oh, they're supposed to be back, and here's 7:30.
It's dark.
They come strolling in, he's fishing Lenny Berg, one of the great icons of the sport, and Lenny, I think, is 85 now. And Steve's mad at Lenny because after pulling 2 miles down the river, Lenny stops at the best spot because he needs to take a leak. Steve's like, what are you doing? Peeing at the best spot. But that's how Steve still feels,
Right.
It's just, he's
you
just
know what,
pushing it.
Who am I to say, but You're a real inspiration to people who love this game, people who love fishing, people who love being a guide, because you are a guide's guide in that you too, like Steve, you like adventure, you like newness, and you're willing to push your own DNA as hard as you can push it to find the new stuff after all these years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a great testament to you and your fellow guides that are all icons. I mean, you're right there with them. All those years fishing tournaments in the learning curve with Dell, and to hear you now still say that you can hardly sleep at night.
And you've remained under the radar for so many years. That's what I find really cool.
I don't want. I stay low key. For sure. But yeah, just, man. Yeah. I mean, one permit out of some oddball new thing that nobody else would think about is worth 20 at flat. For sure. It's just like, yeah. Nobody else will ever think of this. And that's awesome to me. I love it. Yeah.
What's the greatest surprise you've ever had as a guide? If you can find that.
In what way?
Like all of a sudden, like, wow, this is new. This works.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that would be.
Because you've had such a big life for so many years. We forget about all those little hurdles that we jump over along the way of success.
Right.
You know, I would say, you know, for me as a tarpon fisherman, it was actually finally understanding about watching the fish and reading the fish and giving the fish what that fish needs to get the bite. And that relationship between an angler and a fish
right
made all the difference in the world. But unless you're in the bow of a boat all the time, you don't really know fish.
Right.
Like permit. I don't know permit, but you know permit. You know the timing of when to present that fly and the angles and all that. I know when, you know, I mean, I was fishing a long time ago, so we had laid up fish and we understood how to drift that fly into the current and know when to just bump it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that to me was like this enormous light that went off. I got that fish. And I knew I had that fish before I ever threw the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Was there something like that for you as a guide, understanding, you know, where you fished, when you fished those locations? And I would think water level, being able to read water level and that water table that made the fish happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, you know, on the permit scale, because I fish permits so much, just like those moments of when to put the bug out there. And it's just epic different success by knowing that, and versus just chunking it at a permit. And you can always tell, and I won't say names, but there was a guy who fished with, I mean, every guide in the Keys for years and years and years and years and years and years. And the first time I got him on the boat, I went, you have no idea how to fish. A fish was just like, he would see a fish and it's like, cast. I was like, stop.
Wait.
Let's think about this. Let's analyze this. What do we need to do here? You know, and some of that stuff on permit, like, it's huge and people don't think about it. People are like, oh, they're so spooky. Well, they are, but watch what he's doing. Watch for that moment. And that's your time. And that's the time to do it, but do it right the first time. And that's one of the things I think I kind of got from Steve all along was like, I'm a big one cast. One good cast.
That's what Harry always taught me. One cast, one fish.
I'll put the boat right where it needs to go. and then you make the cast. But when I put the boat there, you need to make the cast, because now we're close or whatever, and you're not going to make the 5 bad casts all around. The fish is going to leave, So, I mean, some of those, learning that kind of stuff was always big, versus spots or anything like that. I can't really think of that kind of stuff, I don't know.
Anything you want to throw out there that we haven't spoken about? I mean,
know.
we've had a great conversation about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Anything you want to tell your fellow guides or upcoming guides?
I would love to see guides think a little bit more about their actions and how it's going to affect more than 5 minutes from now. How it's going to affect the tarpon the rest of the season. How it's going to affect those permit for the next 2 weeks. When you come off a flat, I mean, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes. But why are you put the push ball down and pull out away? What are you doing? You should not be starting that motor until you're out in 5-6 feet of water out away from that flat. Every time there's fish there, you might not have a clue that they're there, but now you just blew them out and you've made them run. And biologically, those fish can't keep getting scared away all the time because they're losing calories. And every time they do that, that keeps happening over and over, they're not coming back. They can't do it. It isn't physically possible for them to do that. Just take consideration of what you're doing out there. And same with coming into a spot, okay, there's some other tarpon boats around, or there's some permit guys. Stop out there. Watch for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. See what they're doing. Okay, is it legitimate for me to do this? Am I being a ding-a-ling for doing this? What's the proper thing? And, my Catholic education, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Would you want that guy to do that to you? Probably not. So don't do it to them, just little things like that. And I think we could all be better, including me. I mean, for sure. I don't think we all need to be crazy out there. And I think I've started this year, and I probably will get shot by somebody, but I'm telling people no, this is not good. And I don't mean just guides. I mean recreational people out there, and you just see them do something. It's if we all just sit there and let that keep happening, it will keep happening.
It changes the game.
Yeah, and we can all sit there and go, this guy's doing it. It's talk to him. Right. Just say, hey, here's what's going on here. And it's amazing how people don't know. And I sometimes hesitate. I mean, I hesitate a lot sometimes, because I'll see somebody doing something and I realize they have no idea that there's a bunch of permit that they just ran right over. And you kind of do I want to tell you?
Right, what you just did wrong?
Right. Should I just let you
or
do
just
it?
let because and hopefully they're not going to be doing or coming by that way again tomorrow.
There's a spot in Key West that one of the hotshot guides in Key West has run over that spot so many times.
He doesn't know they're there.
Say names, Mike.
No name.
We want names.
I won't say the name.
We want names.
So many times.
While you're fishing there?
Sometimes while I'm fishing there. A couple times while I'm fishing there. Mostly just going home. And it's one of the best permit spots in Key West. In fact, it's the permit spot in Key West that half the permit over 30 pounds I've ever caught have been on that flat. And just burns right over the top. Burns right over the top of it. And it doesn't realize it. And that's one of those things. It's
you don't want to tell him. No.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything.
No. You have newfound competition.
Leave it alone.
Well, it's been great hanging with you, Michael. I love hanging with you at the ramp, you and your brother, and knowing that you were down here when I first got started. I don't know if I'm a dinosaur, but you definitely are.
we both are dinosaurs.
But everybody has such great affection for you. You know, Harry and Steve Huff and everybody, and the way you and your brother fish. You do your own thing. You go well away from everybody else, and there's great admiration for how you fish and who you guys are as people. And we really appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you.
You're a good pal.
I think all documenting all these great stories of all these people, it's just wonderful. It's just, I can't stop watching, that's for sure.
Well, thank you.
Mike, thanks so much, man. You're a role model to a lot of
Thank
people.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks, pal.
When I saw its West Side Story, when I saw it's just alright.